And here we go.
Started off as a PG podcast, but then Devin just kept on dropping shits and fucks, and
I'm just trying to figure out what's in her mouth.
I just want to see him interview Francesco Accoli.
No, he's a good human being, is what he would say about himself, I'm sure.
Who's hosting this thing?
Take charge, Kevin. Would you? Jesus.
First time we ever met those guys. That was the major drunken pub argument.
I think you guys are the worst.
I'm gonna have to probably watch some Canucks hockey, unfortunately.
Just making friends left, right, and center, and probably some enemies as well.
Tell him to shut up. He needs to hear that every once in a while.
Off to a good start.
All right. We are live.
It's okay to talk when it goes live.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hockey Podcast. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at podcast_hockey, Facebook.com, The Hockey Podcast, YouTube.com, The Hockey Podcast, where you can like and subscribe there as well as we continue to all up the standings of subscribers. We are currently at the 100 and Mikhail Grabovsky of podcast subscribers. So that's the number 84. Keep liking, share, subscribe. Of course, we do have the contest with the Pig and Duke. Well, the Flames Canucks game in April, where you retweet any of our pod clips or any of our podcasts, you win an opportunity to enter into that draw. So check that out. Follow the Pig and Duke as well. And of course, you could subscribe to the audio wherever you get your podcast. That will be up shortly after. It's been a day. I don't know how much time we will spend on the game tonight between the Flames and the Dallas Stars, because I think this was a day of debrief. We'll say, maybe I'll start with some politeness here. Hello, Devin.
Hey, Kev.
What's going on? How are things?
Oh, man. I, along with Gord, am not happy about this outing for the Flames tonight. That's for sure, let alone what's transpired within the past, not even 24 hours. I want to say 24, but not quite 24. It's depending on what side of the Eichel trade you are on. I'd say the majority of Flames fans are a little upset.
Yeah, we will. That's where we're going to start. When we brought from the Fireside Podcast to help us with some perspective today, Dan Stevenson has joined us as well. Hello, Dan.
Hi, one of the few is not upset.
The minority, and yes. So,
not something I am a lot in my life as a white hockey fan. The minority doesn't usually apply to me. So,
white male hockey fan.
That's right.
Yeah. No, happy to have you back on, man. It's been a while.
It has been a while. Yes. And the last time you were on, you predicted that the Canucks would be terrible,
and I got a lot of flack from you guys. And every game I sat there watching, going, there was somebody that was right about this. Who? Oh, there he is. Where's that mirror?
Yeah, exactly.
And then Kevin never called back, and I thought, maybe these guys are just sick of my awesome predictions.
Hey, I for that I've wanted to bring you on a lot sooner than right now.
I've been personally very busy, to be fair to me. Graduating from school, getting myself into this work industry world. So I think I'm deserved a little bit of grace, but fair. We should have brought you on earlier.
That's okay. I got the crystal ball here again, so I'm ready to make some more predictions.
Okay.
And zero grace for you, Kev. Zero.
Yeah, I understand. All right. So if you have any comments, questions, we'll get into that. Let's dig into it. I think that a lot of people are still talking about it. I think people are feeling it. It's really started after the Flames game on Monday. Emily Kaplan reported that the Jack Eichel trade was at the 1 yard line. Devin was pissed off because it was a football reference anyway. And then we then got to yesterday afternoon. Kevin Weeks tweets out that the other thing that Emily Kaplan said, it was between the Flames and the Golden Knights. And then Kevin Weeks tweets out that Matthew Tkachuk is part of a package that is part of a Jack Eichel trade for the Flames. sent Flames Twitter a buzz. And then this morning, before most of us woke up here out west, Jack Eichel ended up in Vegas. We'll start with Devin. So Devin we'll see where Devin is at. How are you feeling? What is your perspective on what has all happened here?
Oh, with Brad Treliving and how much I've really had his back throughout his entire tenure, it's a kick in the nuts to really be honest, because I feel like Calgary potentially could have had a better package, and this is not including Matthew Tkachuk. I want to tell you that. Kevin Weeks is the only insider, quote unquote, that really had Matthew Tkachuk at the forefront there. And I feel if in the long run, if Brad Treliving was able to bring in Jack Eichel, it would have solidified Johnny Gaudreau to stay and Matthew Tkachuk to stay as a Calgary Flame. There's the U.S. tie. All three of those players are U.S.-born players. And along with Johnny has not really had a number one center to play with throughout his entire tenure within Calgary. So having a Jack Eichel center him would have been amazing. And having Matthew Tkachuk there as well, obviously, would have been phenomenal. Because I truly don't believe that rumor last night was 100% true. So who knows exactly what Treliving was actually floating out there with a potential trade offer for Jack Eichel. We can only assume. But if my inkling was actually is and potentially was actually correct, it would have been a first rounder. I would have been either two of our three top prospects of Zeri Pelche and Coronado. And then on top of that, you got to make the money work. So it would have been a Monahan and potentially a Zadorov going the other way, or instead of Zadorov, a Dubé. And obviously a third team would have been involved within that to make that work, I think. And potentially that could have definitely worked. And I think that the biggest thing within this though is that Buffalo said that they really liked Peyton Krebs, and that he was the number one prospect that they were really trying to hone in on. So with all this said, it's all speculation. It really is, as far as the Flames go. I'm disappointed that it didn't happen. I was very excited for that potential. And even Elliot Friedman today said that that Calgary was involved but wasn't a front runner. They really didn't put out a full potential a trade that would have been one that would have been boom. Kevin Adams would have jumped on. So there's a lot of different stories out there, but overall, as a Flames fan, I am a little disappointed, especially when I think that Tkachuk wouldn't have been involved within that trade, and we could have gotten a number one center.
All right, Dan.
I think this team could have got the number one center, but the price we would have had to pay to get him, if Tkachuk is not involved, I think he would have decimated this roster so much. We would have started looking like the Oilers. We have one guy and nobody to play with. Putting him with Dubé and Mangiapane is not how you get your name on Lord Stanley's mug this year. I think that, we all kind of wanted Sean Monahan to go as the keystone piece in that deal. But Monahan is not the keystone center here. You're not going to trade your fourth line center, which is where he is this year, who has a history of injuries, for a guy who's 25 and is a key piece. The Flames, I think, would have had to cough up too much other stuff to get that done. And we know that Buffalo wanted the futures. Calgary doesn't have the futures. So I think if Tkachuk was to go, like Weeks said, the only way that would have happened is because Tkachuk didn't want to come back. And Tree knew that and was then trying to capitalize on the value. Otherwise, I don't think that Tkachuk now for Eichel down the road, when this team thinks they're contender, is the way to go. And I don't know what other pieces you add that aren't just a salary dump.
Yeah, I was the one. I feel a little vindicated here. I don't know Grace Devin, but I was one that I was on Dan's train here. I was the one that I just felt like what the Flames would have had to have given up to make this work would have decimated the team.
And knowing the Flames' luck, Eichel would come back not 100% from the surgery. Like, just knowing the Flames, he would come back at 70% and the whole thing would have been for naught.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you still have, as you were talking about before we jumped on the podcast, you're saying that there's team control for the next, 4 to 5 years? And within that, how much of an impact does that surgery that he wants has as far as the disc replacement surgery in comparison to, this year didn't work out, but potentially next year you have Tkachuk and you have Gaudreau, hopefully Gaudreau signed to a contract and they can maybe gain some chemistry.
I don't think you're going to get all three of those guys signed. I don't see how you get that money to work to get Gaudreau, Tkachuk, and Eichel. I think at that point you go Tkachuk and Eichel, and you're going to have to give up Gaudreau and maybe Backlund or Monahan or some of those big deals to make that money work. Because, that's, $30 million almost in those three of your cap hit. That's a huge amount on your first line that you're going to have to, unless you think Walker Duehr's ready for the NHL at $750,000, I think it's going to be way too much.
And to be fair, Glenn Gladden, I think he's ready for the NHL.
I agree, but if you're taking a guy like Monahan out, is he a Monahan level replacement or is he a Trevor Lewis level replacement, right?
Well, especially him being on the fourth line right now, it's kind of, it's a fourth line player essentially, and then you got to replace him somebody on that top power play unit. Which, Monahan, he has 1 goal and 3 points altogether within this year.
And that was the other thing I was talking about on our show last night is let's just say it would have been for Monahan instead of for Tkachuk, which is sort of the accepted package. I think, Devin, as you said earlier, that it was only Weeks that said Tkachuk. No one else said Tkachuk. Why would I want to take on Monahan as Buffalo, has injury histories as a fourth line guy? And then now Calgary's short on center because now until the All-Star, you got what? Lindholm, Backlund, Dubé, and somebody?
Richardson.
It almost feels like then you've got to go out and move somebody else to get a winger. If you move Tkachuk, same thing. If you move Tkachuk, now who's your top line winger? Mangiapane and Pitlick's number 2? It just feels like either way you're digging yourself into a bigger hole and you're going to have to go trade your way out of.
And I think that within that, though, you have a Pacific Division that really we don't know, especially with Vegas's injuries right now. You have Pat Chiaretti, you have William Karlsson, and you have Mark Stone on the IR. That was the front runner within this, other than obviously Edmonton. Those are the top 2 teams within this division, and everything else was to be who's going to grab that third spot? Because even with the wild card, everybody thought that 2 teams from the Central would hit those wild card spots. So, I completely understand where you're coming from, but if you're taking that risk and you're taking a calculated risk within bringing him in, man, the way that Markstrom the past 2 games have not been the one that has been stealing games for Calgary, but he was playing really well. You had a top 4 defense that was pretty damn good, and then he had a good second line that was playing pretty damn well as well. With Dubé, Richie was obviously out for tonight, but you had Lucic on that second unit with Mangiapane. So it's all calculated, but a player like Jack Eichel does not come available for trade very, very often. I feel like the last one was maybe Eric Lindros.
Before the show, I was saying to Kevin, I think if we look at sort of the era, the salary cap era and the age, the last one was Duchesne.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
If we're looking at a comparable player of a comparable age of a comparable salary in this era, it's Duchesne. And Devin, I know what you're saying, but I also feel like Calgary put out the best package they could. And I don't think it should have been what a lot of people said, just pay the nice man in Buffalo whatever he wants. You can't just keep going all in. And in some ways, I respect Tree for saying, I'm out. I gave you my best deal. Yeah. I'm out. Let's not just keep trying to wring me dry. This has been going on for 6 months. At some point, if we haven't made the deal in 6 months, it's not going to happen. And I give credit for Tree, I would imagine, for saying, this is what we got. We're all in.
And then at the same time, you have 31 other, or I guess 30 other teams other than Vegas that is willing to take a step back here because rumored Carolina was involved as well. And whether or not Kevin Adams' ask was valid and was very much, okay, one team's going to step up and do this. Obviously, no teams really stepped up and was able to provide exactly what he wanted, because I don't think Vegas's return to Buffalo was exactly what Kevin Adams wanted.
No, but I think that ever since Eichel got the second opinion, which was that he should get his surgery, they knew that if they grieved it, they'd have no leverage.
Yeah, they had to make a move now.
Talk about pinch points, right?
And I mean, when was the last time you saw a player that asked for a trade and you got any value for? I mean, as soon as they get that second opinion and a grievance, it's almost, you give him Lucic and you'll get him. Like his stock would plummet. Everyone would be in on it.
I mean, I completely agree. The only other trade that there was a good return on from a player who wanted out was Tampa Bay, and they got Sergachev.
Yep, Duran.
For Duran. Yep. But I mean, that was an anomaly. Sorry, Kev.
And that's also, I'd say, a very different level of player.
Yeah, he's not in Eichel's league. I wouldn't put him in Eichel's league.
No.
I mean, it's sort of like saying when the Flames had a guy that they wanted to move in Neil, they got Lucic. Like, they're very different levels of guys that need out.
And talk about a different circumstance too.
Like, I feel like, and like you said earlier, I think Buffalo had their eye on one guy, and I feel like Calgary was maybe just there to Buffalo was maybe stringing along just to get a better offer from Vegas. And we've seen this how many times with Calgary. We've heard that they were in on Kadri a couple years ago. Like, we hear a ton of this, and it feels like Calgary's always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And I feel like Kevin Adams may have had his mind made up that he wanted this guy and was just using Calgary the whole time to get a better deal.
Yeah, Mark Stone be another one. And sourly enough, he's in Vegas.
And, I mean, Vegas is going to have some cap issues when everyone's healthy. So there may be another domino to fall here in 3 months.
Absolutely. And I want to believe that Pacioretty could be on his way out, potentially. I've heard, the name Riley Smith or William Karlsson checked around. But, okay, William Karlsson, he's a center. They're very thin on center depth. And especially with losing Peyton Krebs. So I'd say Riley Smith could be potentially on his way up. But at the same time, what is Riley Smith right now? What is he? In my mind, he's a middle six player, and on any other team. And what are you going to get for him? A couple draft picks, so you can lose that salary, just like they did with Fleury in this offseason. And it's like it just goes to show that they do not care.
And Pacioretty has a modified no trade, so you can only get those couple draft picks from just a few teams that he allows you to talk to.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a sticky situation. It's like, okay, a future Vegas.
I think we got to look at this. And that's it. Vegas is going to have to deal with it this year, and that's where a team like Calgary might be able to swoop in later and pick up the sort of the cheap remnants if they wanted to.
If they could, maybe a Shea Theodore. I know that's reaching from a Flames perspective, but I know that Theodore was potentially within that trade as well.
And I'm not saying necessarily Pacioretty, but we see this a lot where Pacioretty goes somewhere, then that makes another guy expendable, and you sort of play NHL dominoes until somebody at the end gets moved.
Yep, and that's inevitable with Vegas right now.
Exactly. Sorry, it looks like Kevin's been wanting to chat.
In terms of, I guess it's going to be. I know that Eichel said that he wants to play before the regular season ends. I'm kind of a little cynical of that. I think I see a Kucherov situation here where they activate him for the playoffs because you are going to, and if they do it, that's an interesting move. You're going to have to shake up your team quite significantly to make sure your salary cap compliant for Jack Eichel.
Mm-hmm.
And
the only reason I can see that not happening is I think that, as Devin was saying, Vegas may have lost a couple steps because of all their injuries, and they may not be able to not put Eichel on the ice. Now, he might not be your number one center, but you may have to find a way to get him in the lineup just to make up points. Because when your top two centers are Nicholas Waugh and Chandler Stevenson, you got some issues.
Well, even last year, Chandler Stevenson being the number one center in that lineup with having Mark Stone and Pacioretty on his wings.
Yeah,
man, talk about a middle six center.
exactly.
Trying to make up.
Even if you bring Eichel back
hard.
for a month playing on your third line, you may have to just to start trying to make up some points.
Absolutely, and we don't know exactly what Mark Stone's a timetable to return is.
No,
it sounds like that is very, very questionable. Pacioretty is more streamlined, and I don't think William Karlsson is as bad as either of those two players. But God, you're talking about and even like Alex Tuck, I know he's going the other way, but you're talking about 4 of the top 6 players on that team being injured right now.
Kevin, if they're going to go the Kucherov route, I think you do that with Stone. I think you'd bring Eichel back early and Kucherov it with Stone.
Well, that would make sense because I think the thing that the reason it worked with Kucherov is Kucherov could go in, play, and understand the system. You're doing that with Eichel, who's coming in, getting himself. He's playing the first game in over a year. You're putting him in a playoff situation on a new team. I know that people are high on him, but that's a huge ask. So that would make sense that if you do that with Stone, because at least he knows the team, he knows the system. That probably would make a lot more sense.
And I think again with Eichel, you probably want to test out that disc before you put him in the playoffs, and maybe he's out again. I mean, how often have we seen a guy come back from a big injury, play 3 games or 4 games, and out they go again? So I think you almost want to give that a little bit of a test before you throw him into postseason action.
You definitely have to have, and especially with an asset like Jack Eichel, you need to make sure that he's at least close to 100%, if not 85 to 90% before you chuck him in, because otherwise it's going to be a detriment to the team and to the player.
Yeah. And you know what I think also, though, Vegas, and I know they probably don't agree, I think they can afford to sit this one out. Like, they've been so successful for so many years, I think it comes around for everybody. And if they have a year where they're just injury-ridden, it's not like they're going to be out again next year. When all these guys are healthy, they can figure some of this out in the offseason.
I can tell you they will disagree with you. There are already rumors that DeBoer is on the hot seat.
Yeah, but what coach isn't? I mean, I've heard people say Sutter's on the hot seat. Like, I think
that's such like man.
As a coach, you're hired to be fired, right?
Totally. And we had a guy. Fuck Kev. What's his name? I know you know him.
Tell me more.
Guy.
Some fucking idiot in the offseason saying that Sutter's on the hot seat. It's like, are you kidding me? He had literally fucking, what was it, 15 games? Just under 20 games last year, and you're telling me that he's on the hot seat after signing a 3-year contract?
Adam Kersenblatt from the Hockey News.
That's right. Oh, God, what a fucking idiot, honestly. Dan, you are right. The coaches are hired to get fired, and if a coach isn't working, you got to move on from him. And I mean, there are a bunch of different coaches that are out there. Tortorella being one of them. And Tortorella, I think, if you're looking at what he did with Columbus, Vegas is not much different as of right now, especially with your injuries, than Columbus team.
And I think a team like Vegas, who's trying to get the most out of not great, a guy like Torts could squeeze the best out of them for a year. I think he's one of those short-term guys. You bring him in, sort of like Darryl Sutter, you squeeze the best out of your guys, and then off he goes again in the offseason.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if that would be a like one season or like half a season type of thing. It might be even a season and a half, but you have to give him at least 2 years, full 2-year contract in order for him to sign it, because that's just the way that it goes.
Yeah.
No head coach has really, as far as I know, signed 1-year contracts.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I mean, Travis Green in the hot seat in some ways in Vancouver. Like it's I mean, we talked about that. Let me just, one of the criticisms here, one of the things that has been talked about on Twitter is this number one center, and I'm not, the Flames haven't had that elite number one center for years. I would argue Gilmore has been the best center that has ever played here. That would be my personal opinion. I would put him ahead of Nieuwendyk, but fair enough. because you look at Stanley Cup, but I also think that the other problem, my counteract to that is you look at Tampa Bay. Braden Point is an elite number one center. I don't think there's any dispute about that. But they had to bring in a Blake Coleman and a Barclay Goodrow to win the Cup. You look at Pittsburgh; they had to bring in they had that Bonino, Hagelin, Kessel line. Even Washington had to bring in some players to win the Cup. St. Louis a little bit too. I think you're right. I agree that you need a number one center to win the Cup, but you also need depth. And I think that's where the other thing that I think was really missed in this, in the whole be nice to Buffalo and give them what they want. You need depth to win a Cup.
I agree with you, Kevin. And I think, to me, I think, you definitely need a number one center. Is Lindholm that guy? I'm not too sure yet, but I think you can't just have, it's not like the old days where I remember back in the day when you'd have teams, spend everything they had on a number one center and you could get by with that without all the depth. I think now I would take depth over the elite center. You need a number one center, but I think I'd take depth over, say, a top 10 center, just money wise. As we were talking about earlier, if your whole line is $30 million, you don't have a lot of money left for depth.
Yeah.
Just ask Toronto. Trust me, I know.
Well, I think that's a great one. And, we even look at guys like a Mangiapane and guys like that who aren't going to be making elite money, but they're key cogs to this team. Yeah. And we've seen teams in the past who've had one center. I mean, I would even look at the Stamkos era of Tampa Bay where, he was doing it and the second line was doing it, and there really wasn't a lot else there for a few years.
It's true. And talk about depth throughout your entire lineup. Shillington's found money as of right now. Who knows if he can keep this up? And I really hope he can. It's a small sample size, but he's played very, very well within top 4 minutes with Tanev, and more depth within that. The Kiprusoff days are over and done with. Like you're not trotting a guy out there for 70 plus games a year. And expecting him to perform at the same level within the playoffs. So depth is a massive piece. And I want to believe that Calgary wouldn't have traded depth to get Jack Eichel.
What else do they have, Devin?
They would have had to have gutted the core to make this deal really work, because
I don't know if I believe that. I believe that the future would have been 100% gutted within this trade.
What future? We've got Zari, we got Peltier,
and Coronado.
Okay,
and then a first round draft pick on top of that. Plus, you have to make the money work. So then you give them a little bit more within a Valimaki.
But even then, we're not getting rid of the current future. But so now we get rid of the future, and now we got a great first line. Who's going to backfill? Are we going to go and find Trevor Lewis again next year?
Well, that's the thing is, though, I feel like there are players within this system, like a Glenn Godden, like a Dewar, that would be able to step in and do a decent enough job to get that to get it done, especially with the fact that Daryl Sutter has done as well with this team. And once again, small sample size. Yes, it's only been 10 games or 11 games, but what they've done. This is not a Daryl Sutter-esque team that I was expecting to come out here and play. They trade chances. Yes, they're decently sound defensively, and they're still having enough chances. Like not this game, but against the Predators, they had 3 breakaways, and one of them, yes, granted, was Tkachuk toe picking and probably potentially hoping for a penalty or potential penalty shot. But it's not for the lack of chances here. We are very. I'm pleasantly surprised with what Daryl Sutter has done as a head coach here, and that is something that is to a certain extent, no matter who is in this lineup, you can definitely, if you have the right pieces as far as young players wanting to play the system, they can play it.
But what happens when Daryl leaves? I mean, Daryl was retired. We brought him out of retirement. What about when he leaves? Now you've got Eichel, Tkachuk, Goudreau, and company. It's like a law firm and associates. And now you don't have Daryl Sutter, and you go back to unknown ECHL coach number 9 again. And are we going to get the same out of Martin Pospisil at that point? I think we can't just look at this as long as Daryl's here. the ship's on the right course. At some point, Daryl's going to have to go back and tend the farm. I think that's part of the reason these guys are doing so well. You're not getting a conditioning practice. You're going to have to go sow the field if you're not playing well.
But the thing is that win now is right now, is within the next 2 years. It's within this Sutter contract. Outside of that, I mean, if we don't get far, if Calgary doesn't get far within the playoffs or even get to the playoffs, then it's a complete and massive miss, and it's going to be a complete gut of the system. And then we can trade everybody out of here and actually have my biggest thing right now is that if Jack Eichel came to Calgary, we'd have a vision. We'd have a direction where we're going. Calgary hasn't had a direction in years. So that's one of my biggest things as a fan is that I want to have a direction.
We'd have a direction, but we'd also have to figure out how to tread water without Tkachuk or whoever for 6 weeks. And 3 months, whatever it's going to
be. My comments is without Tkachuk in the mix because I don't think that was a thing. Sorry, Kev.
I think for just listening to Eichel, I mean, would he want to be? We are basically is potentially what could have happened here. The Flames get Eichel, they trade whatever, they trade the farm to get him, and it ends up, Eichel is ready to go next season, and he
has to get out of here.
He was because it's the same situation as it is in Buffalo.
Oh, no, you can't say that. Does he have a Gaudreau and Tkachuk on his wings within that system? You have an Victor Olofsson, who is a very underrated good player. Outside of that, who the fuck do you have? You have nobody.
You have Dylan Cousins.
But he didn't play with Cousins though. He didn't play with Cousins.
Okay, but right now I'm just looking to compare. Right now, Dylan Cousins is going to be a player in this league. You still have Rasmus Dahlin, who was a number 1 pick. They're
not comparables yet, though.
No, but they at least have something that they are able to start that foundation. With Eichel and the prospects that you're giving up, you're not there yet. And potentially, and I keep saying this, if the Flames probably won't get the first pick because you're giving up a first-round pick, which could be a Wright or a Bedard or someone really strong in these next 2 drafts, which creates another issue for the Flames.
But if you look at what Vegas gave up, they had their first-round pick top 10 protected. On top of that,
I was surprised about that.
How fucked is that?
I was really, really surprised by.
Along with the 3rd round pick coming back the other way with Eichel. I feel like it's very, as far as a Buffaloes fan, I would be upset with that. As good as Peyton Krebs is and Alex Tuch is not within that window. I mean, yes, he could be a good leader and he's a good top 6 forward within this league who works his ass off. And granted, also, what came out was that he has ties to Buffalo and that he actually cares about being there. That's a big thing. But overall, it's very underwhelming of what they got for Jack Eichel and what I feel like Calgary potentially could have given.
Okay, let me defend Buffalo here for a second, though. Just to play devil's advocate. Because I sort of see your point, but I also might want to see this. You get a guy, okay, so let's say it's Monahan or a Tkachuk. Let's say it's Monahan or a Tkachuk, one of those guys. If you're a Sean Monahan at this point of your career, which is probably you're not at your top, you're recovering from injuries. You just came out of
you're at your top of your earning years, but not your playing years.
Yeah. You're coming out of a 4th line center. Are you really wanting to go and play in Buffalo, or are you wanting to be somewhere a little bit closer to the Stanley Cup?
Well, I don't think you're going to get somewhere close to the Stanley Cup. I think Buffalo's where you rehab that image.
And whether or not Tkachuk went or not, Tkachuk probably would have been flipped, realistically. Mm-hmm. Tkachuk doesn't want to stay there.
Okay, so if you flip Monahan, if you're flipping Monahan, they did the flip for Taylor Hall. They signed Taylor Hall and flipped him. They didn't get a lot for him. Are you getting a lot for Monahan if you're flipping him?
I think you flip Monahan at the deadline if you want to maximize your return.
100%. But if Monahan was involved, I feel like a 3rd team would have been involved. I don't think it would have been a 1-for-1 or a 2 organization trade.
And in that case, Devin, I feel like if you're trading 13 and 23, there's better returns you can maybe get.
But 13 wouldn't have been involved.
It's either going to have to be 19 or 13. It's not going to be Monahan, a couple prospects, and draft picks.
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked. I don't think that would have worked for Buffalo.
No, but it's that. But Kev, it's not for Buffalo. It's for one other team to make the money work within that. Look at who was the third team within the Duchesne trade.
It was
it
Ottawa,
St. Louis?
Colorado, Nashville.
Nashville, yeah. Look at Nashville now. Like I feel like they definitely missed the boat within that trade. And that's the one thing with having a 3-team trade is that normally there's one team sitting out high and dry.
The issue there, I think, with this one, Devin, I don't know. There's a lot of guys that want to deal with Adams right now. Like, I think if it was other teams, maybe, but I'm hearing stuff from around the league that a lot of GMs don't want to deal with Kevin Adams. So I'm not sure he's involved in the 3-team trade.
Well, no, but okay, once again, this is all hypothetical, right? So hypothetical, like it. If you had Monahan within that trade and it was just a 2-team trade, like Kevin, you did say like Monahan or Tkachuk, like those are 2 massively different players.
Yeah.
Right. And so with Monahan to resurrect his career, you need to put him in a good spot. And it's one of those things like, okay, well, if we get Monahan, we're eating that salary. We need a little bit more out of your farm. We need one more pick. We need one more player within your farm to make that work, kind of thing. Like it's all a trade-off within that. But realistically, these are all like what ifs, and it's hard to really pin down exactly what's happening within that. But overall, like having a number 1 elite center, and people like, oh my God, my biggest pet peeve within this entire thing is Flames fans and other fans saying that Jack Eichel is not an elite number 1 center within this league.
I think he's definitely a top 10 center.
And
Kevin, go ahead, Devin.
Just look at his numbers. Look at his numbers on a shitty team and how well he played.
Let me just. I'm just going to play devil's advocate again.
Love
just
it
for the hell of it, because I heard something from Winnipeg today that I thought was really interesting.
You listen to people in Winnipeg?
Yes, I do. Well, I listen to everybody. I try to, I absorb all the things, which is either a detriment or not. Do you think Kyle Connor is an elite number 1 winger?
Yes.
Okay, so because Eichel's numbers are actually comparable to Connor.
I think Connor, I don't know if he's being used that way in Winnipeg, but I feel in the right situation he could be.
Kyle Connor, he's.
I think Eichel is
one of the most.
I will agree with you on this, for the record.
Connor is one of the most underrated wingers within this league.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it is unquestionable. Him, DeBrincat, him and DeBrincat, I feel like are on the same level. They are elite snipers that don't give it enough credit within this league because they don't have a. And some people might get upset with me. They don't really have a center that really fits very well with the way they play. And there's nothing against Scheifele within that, but at the same time, or Dubois, depending on who he's playing with. It's just I feel like there's better playmaking centers that would make him better, along with if we're bringing things back here to Calgary, Johnny Gaudreau has not had an elite number 1 center to play with. And that is a scary thought to think that he could be better than he actually has been.
Okay, so let's just pause here because this is the second part of my whole thing that I wanted to bring into this. Where are we with Elias Lindholm? Because we've already, I feel like, Devin, you're pretty convinced he's not an elite center. Is he on a projection that he could be?
Oh man,
I think he's a serviceable number 1 center, but not an elite center.
I'd agree with that. He definitely has his moments. He's like a Backlund 2.0, if you will, as far as being a shutdown center. But I feel like he is. If Jack Eichel could have come here, he could have been his right winger. he has a completely underrated shot within this league, and if he gets a chance, and if he wasn't more, if he wasn't so defensively minded, which is like one thing that you really want within your lineup, you want to have a good two-way a center within this league. But I feel like if you have the center depth, which Calgary doesn't really have as of right now, he could be an elite right winger within this league. I truly believe that. But to your question, Kev, he is. Yeah, I agree with Dan. He's a good 1B center and a good second line center.
I think he's a serviceable number one on a deep team. What we were talking about earlier. If you've got the depth, he's a serviceable number one. If you don't, he's a second line guy.
Yeah.
I think he's getting there. I mean, I think I've seen I've been impressed with Lindholm at center so far this year. I think,
but this is also Lindholm's 26-year-old season. Like, you don't generally get to that point after 26 if you're not on that trajectory already.
Right. No, that's fair. But yeah, I mean, I feel like when we're saying we don't have, like, I just want to kind of see where we're at with Lindholm, because I mean, if this happened, Eichel Lindholm would have been a great 1-2 combination, but.
And especially Backlund, number 3. Like, the other thing with Lindholm is that his cap hit is so friendly. $4.85 billion for the next 3 years, including this one. Like, that's outrageous for what he does.
And that's why I think even if he starts to slip a little bit, I mean, even in a third line, you can pay that kind of money. Like, this is a guy who you'll find a spot for somewhere because he's so friendly.
Yeah. And Kevin, this isn't a detriment or a like saying that Lindholm is not a good center within this league and a good number one center within Calgary. There are better number one centers within this league, and Jack Eichel is one of them.
Yep. Okay, so let me maybe ask a different question then. If the Flames built the depth behind Lindholm, are the Flames closer to the cup?
It depends what you mean by that. You know, like there's so many different variations within that. But I mean, realistically, yeah. If you have more depth,
if they improve if they improve the bottom 6, if it's not the Lucic, Lewis, Ritchie gang, is that also a law firm, by the way, Dan? Do we have that as a law firm as well, or
not yet?
Oh, okay, because I was thinking about that.
They're paralegals.
I'm going to go buy the domain for that, though, while we're talking. To me, the bottom 6 in the Flames issue. I think if I look at the Flames year after year, they've been deep enough. What we're not getting is we're not getting the production out of those players. How many years have we said the Flames look good? The Flames don't perform the way they should. I think that we're sick of just trying to plug guys in behind Gaudreau, behind Monahan, behind Lindholm. I think it's about, as Devin said earlier, using a coach like Daryl Sutter to get the most out of those guys. And I think it's not so much about just plug the holes in the lineup. I think on paper, they've had a good enough roster to be, second, third, round team for 5 years now. I think it's about getting the most out of those guys. And I think that's what Daryl Sutter's doing. He's making Lindholm look better than he should. And that's what you want out of a coach. I mean, you could say Hartley did that with Josh Juris, right? Where's Josh Juris now? The guy looked fantastic that year. That's what you want out of a coach. The guy you can make your 1B center look like, and have guys like Kevin asking, is he an elite center?
Yeah, and I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from, but I feel like Josh Juris isn't really the best player to be, comparing Lindholm to. But I do appreciate where you're coming from and understand where you're coming from.
I loved Josh Juris the one year that Josh Juris was in Calgary.
I did too, for sure. And you do have those one-offs for absolutely.
We all love David Moss too. He looked good for 5 games.
Yeah, and Joe Colburn. Once we were out of the playoffs, he lit it up.
That's right,
Mark Jankowski.
But so I think I don't know that's plugging the holes behind Lindholm, and to me the bottom 6 is not the issue. The issue to me is the right wing. When you've got Tyler Pitlick as your second best winger, I mean, I think Mangiapane's emerging there, but I think we've said on our show for years, they've got to fill that right wing. So I think it's not just about the bottom six, it's about getting the right guys into those positions.
And it definitely is the right wing, and that's why Tree Living went after Mark Stone, right? Yeah. And which is another one that's like I've been on this. I've talked about it where I've actually gone back and forth on it multiple times of being like, okay, well, what are we giving up, or what would we have gotten up for, or gave up for Mark Stone? It would have been a Val Mackey, as I remember. It would have been a first and another player, and man, especially at that time, we were looking. Was that the year that we got swept by not swept, but it was 4-1
might as well
by Colorado.
And again, Devin, a deal the Flames were in on and didn't get done. I mean, even last year we heard whether you liked it or not, in on Hall didn't get done. Like, it seems like we're forever in on these things, and the question is, why are we not getting done? Is it because Tree's not offering enough, or is Tree holding his guns, or do guys just not want to come here?
That's I guess that's the other thing, is that maybe the guys don't want to come here, and maybe they talk to the GM and say, "Hey, listen, I've been very serviceable player for you guys, and I want some common courtesy here that you don't ship me off to a place like Calgary."
And for all we know, that could have been the deal with Eichel. Eichel's agent could have called Adams and said, "We would rather take Vegas."
Oh, I mean, absolutely, you would. You're in Nevada, who doesn't have any state tax. You're in Nevada, who has Las Vegas, where the team is actually located, or you come to Calgary. To me, it's a no-brainer. And talk about a place that Eichel, I feel like, would thrive outside of playing hockey. It's fucking Vegas.
Can I do a thought experiment with you guys here?
Yeah,
I have a hard time thinking, but we'll try.
Eichel's contract would have been $10 million. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get an elite center, but let's look at the centers who are of the same age who are UFAs this summer. If we don't spend $10 million, who could we bring in for similar money to, as Kevin said, shore up some of that depth? Would you go after Max Domi, who's 27, making half that?
No. Would
you go after Pierre-Luc Dubois?
It depends how he does this year. In my mind.
Would you go after Victor Rask, a little bit older?
No.
Would you go after Dylan Strome?
Oh, no, he's worse off than Lindholm.
Like, I'm wondering if we could bring some of these guys into. Well, you're not going to get the elite center there. Could you get the guys who are those serviceable 2-3-4s to create a good enough, scoring by committee group?
The question is like, okay, so Lindholm is the number one center. So then who's taking that second C spot? Because Backlund, he's getting older. He's a good shutdown third pairing or third line center. So it's just filling that either like you were talking about before, Dan, a right winger or a second line center. And right now, Sutter's trying to groove Dubé to be that second line center, and right now he's done a good job so far. But realistically,
I think Mangiapane is more likely to be in that role next year than Dubé.
A center?
Or sorry, no, the right wing.
Right wing.
I think he'll fill the right wing spot, and more than they've tried Dubé on both wing and center. I think that we are going to need to bring in the center.
Yeah, fair. But those guys, they don't really move the needle for me, especially Victor Rask. The only one that really kind of stands out to me is, Pierre-Luc Dubois, yes, and a Dylan Strome just to be a bit under that. Yes, Kevin.
What about Thomas Hertl?
Is he a center?
Yeah, 28. Center, right wing, left shot. I think the good thing about Hertl, he's making 5.6 this year. I think he's in his highest earning years. I would maybe take him if I could get him for less than what you're paying Lindholm now. If you can get him a 4, I think it's a good deal.
And talk about a gritty player too, like underrated grittiness within Thomas Hertl. He likes to get in the dirty places. Him and Tkachuk on the same line, that'd be greasy.
Well, and that's why I kind of like Domi too. He comes from that pedigree.
I feel like Domi, he does have that high-end talent, but it hasn't shown it often enough for me to be yes.
Fair.
So let me throw just 3 other names that I'm just going to throw them out there, considering all that could potentially happen just for this year. If, they want to make the run. Maybe these names are ridiculous and you'll tell me I'm ridiculous. Let me throw one name out.
You're
First
ridiculous.
Name.
Oh, sorry. I'm supposed to wait for the names.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anze Kopitar.
If Sutter's here, man, is he making 10? I think he's making 10. Let me check.
My answer to Kopitar is I want to know the return, and I feel like LA is going to ask more for. I think Kopitar is one of those guys. There's going to be a lot of teams willing to pay his price, and I'm not sure that we want to get into a bidding war for him as a rental guy.
He's making $10 million until 25.
Yeah,
I don't want that.
UFA 24-25. So he has after this year he has 2 years.
I don't know if I want that much money. If we're going to spend that much money, I'd rather lock up guys like Tkachuk, guys like Gaudreau, some younger guys. I don't want to bring in that much for that long.
No, and like if anything, it would be a rental if there was an injury and be cap bullshit.
Okay, let me throw another name out. Ryan Getzlaf.
I don't think Getzlaf's enough of a needle mover at this point. I think if you end up trading Monahan for somebody, he becomes your veteran sort of depth centerman.
Yeah, fair. Sorry, Kev. I gotta. Can we block this asshole?
Yep.
That'd be great, and delete him. Yeah. No. Getzlaf is. His consistency isn't quite there, and to get him to move outside of California, I think would be very, very hard. He would have to want to come here. I feel like he would be a Jason Spezza-esque to be, hey, I'm not going to be moved.
Kevin, what do you think the likelihood is we start seeing guys in the Blackhawks wanting out, and there might be teams like Calgary get a sweet deal that way?
That was my next name, and I'm going to bring him up. I know he's not popular right now. I'm just going to bring him up. Jonathan Toews.
I got to look up the cap hit on that.
He's making 10.
But for how many years?
I think 3. He's very, very similar to Kopitar, I'm pretty sure. But as of right now, he needs to really show that he can be that potential other shutdown, because realistically, if we're bringing him in,
he's 10.5 till 24, till 24,
and he's 32.
So one more year after this, I'd have a hard time paying that much.
Let me realistically ask you too. He's got no move. Do you think he waives it to come to Calgary? There would be a lot of suitors around the league for him.
For sure, and let alone coming to Canada or Calgary for that matter. I feel like it would be. You'd have a list of teams that in Calgary would not be. Calgary would not be on that list, depending on how well they do and are there any other connections there as well?
If we're gonna try and get a guy cheap off Chicago, I'd almost rather try to get Dominic Kubalik, and he's a left winger, and try to convert him to your right. I think that's a better deal cap wise and player wise than Kane, because you're not getting the no move waived on Kane.
No. I don't think just to go back to Taste just for a quick second. I think maybe there may be one Canadian team he would think about, but I don't think he'd want to play in Canada. Would be my thought.
No, I don't think so.
And I think, too, if you're looking to bring in that elite centerman, you're not bringing in a 32 or 33-year-old. Kane and Taves are 32 and 33, respectively. Like, at that point, I think if we're looking at sort of a Jack Eichel replacement, I think we can do better in, even their late 20s. But I think if, unless you think this is the year, then you bring one of those guys in. But otherwise, now you've got a 33-year-old, and you're saddled with a huge cap hit as we're trying to re-sign 2 key players.
And let alone, especially at that cap hit, you'd have to ask Chicago to retain, and then they would ask for more as far as prospects or draft capital.
If you think this is your year, I could see going out and doing that, Devin, giving up the first, the second, and one of those players for a Kane or Taves, and then they hoist the cup here, but it's a huge gamble.
It's massive. Banners fly forever. Just to ask Vancouver. Oh, wait, no, sorry, not Vancouver. No, it's.
But and I'm not sure that we're at a point where we want to make that gamble.
No, yeah, you got to have a consistent third round, at least third round presence within the playoffs for that to be okay. This is the year, right? And that's where the argument comes in. Okay, give whatever you can to Ottawa for Mark Stone for that playoff run against Colorado. Does that make a difference? I mean, we don't know, but a lot of people think that would have made the difference, especially losing Tkachuk. Yeah,
I think with Kane and Taves having no move clauses and $10 million and being in their early 30s, I think that's a huge gamble. But hey, if you get Taves, Kevin, you got your captain here finally.
I don't think you're naming him captain.
Imagine.
Oh man, especially with the shitstorm.
So I asked Matt this yesterday. If you bring Eichel in, do you want me to throw the C on him?
No.
I think you go the whole year without a C, without a captain, Eichel or not. I think this whole year, no captain. That would be my. I've been converted. I think that would be the route because it's working. I feel like the team is developing its own leadership identity.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you were getting to that idea of the scoring by committee, the deep team, and I would rather get some of that depth going than necessarily go out and spend the farm on a 33-year-old centerman.
Well, I guess my question, I guess this is the thing that I've been pondering for some time, though, Dan, is it felt like all of this offseason, not only Calgary, but I feel like the NHL, in terms of the trade market, was waiting for this Eichel foot to drop. And I was like, that was kind of like the focus.
I think Calgary for sure. I feel like Calgary's roster is incomplete because they were waiting for that to happen to fix some things.
But I also was wondering if there was another name that that was out there that we weren't paying attention to. I mean, if someone asked, who's the next guy? And I would have to think that I think Chicago is going to go on a fire sale here. Like whenever they get their new man, they've got some work to do. And I think they're going to be in a house cleaning mode. But I don't.
Who else then?
If there was one guy I would love the Flames to take a shot at, I think it would take a lot to get him out. But one guy I've always been a fan of is Dylan Larkin.
Oh man, you're talking about the heart and soul of that team.
Yeah, it would be a hard get.
That would be.
And I guess the question is, are you bringing in somebody else's top line guy? Are you trying to find the Lindholm-like guy who's maybe stuck on a second line somewhere and needs a shot, or is behind an elite centerman and you can get value on?
Yeah, and I'm just looking at Larkin right now. Larkin's 25, making 6.1 for one more year after this one. You got to think that he's going to be asking for more. He's probably going to be an 8.5 player, especially within Detroit. I would love for that to be a potential, but God, that Stevie Y is going to be asking a shit ton for a player.
And again, I think there's going to be a lot of suitors there. And do we want to be, sort of like the Eichel deal? Do we want to be forever anteing up and anteing up and anteing up against all those teams?
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out the next, because there is going to be someone that will come up here. That will happen. It's just, who is it?
I mean, potentially I could see a Logan Couture, depending on which direction San Jose is going. He's a good possibility. I think he's I want to say that he's 28, 29, and on
somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah, like a decently team-friendly deal. I'm going to look him up right now. He is Logan Couture, $8 million. Oh my God, $8 million for another it looks like 6 years, if not
And San
7.
Jose is going to have some cap issues down the road, so I can see them wanting to move some money.
And yeah, Couture's 32. Holy. That is San Jose has a deal there that is you have Brett Burns for another 3 years after this at $8 million. You have Erik Karlsson at 11.5 until forever for another 6 years. You have Mark-Edward Vlasic at $7 million for another 4 years after this. Like, holy. Dan, you're right. If you're going to try and get a good deal, that would be San Jose.
I think if you're looking for an older player in their late 20s, early 30s, I think a team that's going to struggle this year is going to be the Flyers. And I think there's some guys there that if you're willing to go late 30s, early 40s, even a guy like Cam Atkinson, who's 32, he's a right winger, at 5, almost 6, that's a reliable piece in your team. And I think that there's going to be some movement there. The other team, Kevin, I think you'll see some movement out of is Columbus. But I don't know what you want out of Columbus. They're not giving up Roslovic.
No, you're not. I mean, Cole Sillinger.
Well, but again, where do you want them on the lineup? I mean, if you're bringing this guy in to be your number 2, I don't think the Sillinger's number 2. If you're bringing him in to be, a depth guy, maybe.
Well, I mean, he could elevate Backlund because he has been there before. It'd be a bit of a stretch, and he can maybe platoon that 2-3 centerman together. It'd be hard, especially with him being so unknown. Going back to Philly, I mean, Travis Konechny has been in trade rumors for a very long time, let alone potentially coming to Calgary. I wouldn't mind seeing him within Calgary colors, especially with the grittiness that Mangiapane brings, that Tkachuk brings. I feel like we're building a culture here for gritty, good, skilled players, and he might be a good fit as well.
And if you want to go after the Kane or Taves or that older center, at that point, I'd go Giroux if you can get him to waive his no move. He's got 1 year at 8.5, better contract, better rental contract.
I brought him up before too. I thought that would be an interesting. I don't know if he would move, but that would be an interesting.
I've said for a few years on our show, I could see a deal, not necessarily now, but a couple years ago, I could have seen a deal, Monahan and Gaudreau for Giroux and Konechny, and a few other pieces going back and forth. But there was a time where I thought that could make some sense.
Straight up now, that doesn't make so much sense.
Now,
but
no.
But for sure, like back
2 years ago?
2-3 years ago, for sure, yeah.
There's another team I'm just curious. Might be in that sell mode, and they played tonight. What about Dallas? Yes, they won tonight, but they don't look like a great hockey team.
I think Dallas is enough of a contender that they're not going to see themselves as selling because they had a bad year.
If they are going to sell and they are a dog shit at the deadline, you can see Joe Pavelski going somewhere. He's 37, has $7 million left on his cap hit, and he could potentially be on his way out along with Radulov. He's a 6.25 cap hit, 35 years old. He has a no movement clause, and same with Joe Pavelski. But depending on if they're contenders, man, or whichever team are contenders, you could definitely see them waving to go there to hopefully get a chance at a cup, because Pavelski, he was so damn close and has been so damn close with San Jose and wasn't able to get over that hump. So look for that as well potentially. But outside of that, I really don't see anybody wanting a 9.5 Jamie Benn or a 9.85 Tyler Seguin. Both of them have no movement clauses as well. And Seguin is locked up long term, at least 5-6 years, maybe even 7 years past this. And Jamie Benn is another 3 years past this at 9.5. So, yeah, God, it's a shitty situation for Dallas.
I think the Pens might struggle this year. If you're the Flames, do you go out and try to make a move for Kasperi Kapanen if that's the case?
Talk about a middle six player that could has some skill and has a bit of grittiness too. I
don't think would take a king's ransom to acquire.
Nope. And to Kev's point, you're looking at it was one of your 2 points. Looking for for me, it's a middle six player, a middle six skilled player that can play both sides of the puck, and you're able to put out in multiple situations. Those are the type of players that if you make it to the playoffs, they fucking matter.
And I feel like there's a hockey deal to be made there. I feel like Pittsburgh is weak on the blue line, and Calgary's got some blue line depth. So I'm wondering if there's a hockey deal to be made of a blue liner for Kapanen.
Or even, I mean, this is a bit of a long shot, and granted, he's injured a lot, but Evgeny Malkin as well. He's been in rumor talks as well. And, I mean, you do have a new GM with Ron Hextall and Brian Burke being hockey ops. Really interesting to see how that goes. And Chris Letang has been in the rumor mill as well. Maybe not so much for Calgary, but for another team here, depending on how well things go for them, because they just had Crosby. He came back from his wrist surgery, played, I think, 1 or 2 games, and now he's back on COVID protocol. And your top line center is Jeff Carter. Are we in 2010 or what?
Yeah, no, I agree. And then, Kevin, if you're looking for sort of a cheap, a team that might be willing to sell cheap, a name I brought up on our show before, if you're looking for short-term help, he's older, do you go out to Seattle and try to get a guy like Eberle just to fill some middle six roles?
Who got the first ever hat trick in Seattle Kraken history today. Congratulations to Jordan Eberle.
And he's an Alberta boy. I believe he's a Calgary boy.
Yeah, and not a guy that you're looking at to be a huge part of this team, but to bring in that sort of veteran, guy. I could see Seattle's not invested in this player. I could see there being, again, a move there for a younger piece if you just want to bring in a middle six guy.
I'm not a big fan of Jordan Eberle, but if they did it, depending on the cost, yeah, I'd be down for it.
That wouldn't be my first choice, but I think that Eberle's I think Eberle's played on a lot of teams like the Islanders and now Seattle, where I don't think he's necessarily going to get a shot. I think he was played too high up the lineup in Edmonton, and I don't know that he was given enough minutes in the Islanders, and I'd like to kind of see what he could do with the right players on his line.
Yeah, that would be... I mean, I could see him in a fit. I could see him as a fit on a Backlund, Coleman, Eberle line if he wanted to go there. Dylan brings up a good. First, Dylan, I have to bring this one up. He's going to. This is Ryan Getzlaff. He's going to Tampa at the deadline to reunite with Perry and Maroon for the slowest fourth line in history. Possible.
That's where the fans will start chanting, "Skate, Forrest!
Skate, Forrest, skate!" What? And this is another guy, though, that has been... Ricard Raquel has been mentioned in Calgary talks.
And hey, Dylan, how about Troy Terry? I don't know if you've heard of him before, but he's been doing pretty decent for the first time ever in his career within this first little bit of this season.
My only concern with the Ducks is the Ducks have been linked to selling for a few years now. Every year we hear the Ducks are going to sell, the Ducks are going to sell. It seems like they're happy with what they've got as far as a rebuild, and I'm not sure what Calgary would offer them to get a guy like Raquel.
Okay, I'm going to, just because I'm just going to throw this out here, Dan. Where are you with Valimaki?
I don't think Valimaki ever hits the potential that people thought he would with all of his injuries. I mean, we still have yet to see this guy really play a full 82-game season. I think he's probably going to be a 4, 5, 6 at his top level, but I don't think he ever gets much higher than that based on the injury history he's had.
See, this was my theory coming in when Daryl came in, and we probably should have, this is where we should have brought you in, probably. This is, I think that the Flames brass was higher on their prospects than Daryl was when he saw them.
Well, and there's been some talk that the Flames brass was not happy with the way he ran training camp this year because he was playing all veteran guys, and they said, we want to look at the prospects, and said, why? These are the guys that need to be ready to go on day one.
I definitely see both sides to that, and it was very similar to last year too, right? Brought up the prospect of Matthew Phillips, and he was not played. He only played one game. after Calgary was completely out. But I do see both sides of that, where being a new coach coming in, you want to make sure that you set the tone right off the bat. And as Flames brass, man, yeah, you got to be a little upset that you're not being able to see, okay, what your top prospects are going to do at, playing with NHL caliber players. It's a fine balance. Daryl said it in his first interview here. He's not here to be mediocre. He's here to win a cup, and he will do everything that he can to do that. And within the lineups, you had the NHL roster as one group, you had the AHL roster as one group, and then you had the junior kids as one group. Like oh man, it's a hard line to walk. But I mean, good for Daryl to stick into his guns. But as an organization, you got to wonder, okay, where does Zary fit? Where does Pelche fit? And granted, Zary, he played well, and then he got injured. But it's one of those things where, hey, listen, you get what do you want out of this team?
And I honestly think that because the Flames focus more on the veterans, I think that's why we're seeing great success right now, is because those guys were ready to go at the start of the season.
Yep. I mean, look at Lucic. He got 2 goals in 2 games. Trevor Lewis, I think he's played very well. I want to give props to Zadorov tonight. I thought he played very well. Surprisingly enough, maybe not so much in his defensive zone, but there wasn't too many gaffes or mistakes that really caused any offensive chances on Markstrom. So overall, the
defense had 8 points tonight.
Yep. And going back to your question, Kevin, I mean, if we look at the defense, we see the opposite of what we're seeing this year. Shillington is in and Valimaki's out. Like, I think one of those two guys is going to emerge as a serviceable NHLer. The other is going to be traded. I think there's value in one of them, and I think the Flames are going to have to pick which one they want to hang on to.
Yeah, I go back to something that Daryl said last year. Was his words? He said that maybe this is just a generational talk, but he did use the word sense of entitlement with the young players, and that has been sort of ringing in my head when we think about the Flames. Is there sort of this sense of entitlement with that was his perception.
And how much of that do you think is just the fact that we don't have a lot of prospects? Like, if you're the only defensive prospect, I think there's a sort of automatically a sense of entitlement there, where if you're one of 9 guys, there's, I think, sort of less of that built in. I think it's sort of like Matthew Phillips. I can see that because he's sort of the next guy up, and there's not a lot of other options.
Yeah. I think Valimaki played like a guy that felt like he didn't have competition last year.
Well, I think Valimaki also came over from a men's league before the NHL started, maybe felt like he was at a higher level because of that.
Yeah.
Well, and he also had the golden bucket over there in the Finnish league, which is the highest score, right? And yeah, it coming into training camp like that. And granted, it was a very short training camp, but you had Connor Mackey as well, who's a good defensive prospect within this organization and highly touted. I don't know exactly where he's at. It sounds like he just needs some professional
He needs some time to play pro hockey.
Exactly. And that's the biggest thing. Okay, where is he at? And the fact that Shillington has been able to step up in the role that he has and being a top 4 defense pairing, that's huge. That is a found money within this organization. And thinking about the fact that he went through waivers last year in Ottawa or Detroit, didn't take a chance on him because of his raw skill and talent. Man, that's a massive miss by everybody else. And thankfully enough, he's been able to thrive within playing with Tanev, because Tanev, he really thrives. Like, Tanev thrives with having an offensive defenseman to play with them, let alone the young guy. And he's like, in Vancouver, his nickname was Dad. So it kind of just falls in line with exactly what we've been wanting and potentially thinking that, okay, Valimaki would be in that spot, but Shillington, he stepped up and fuck it, it's been found money.
I've said since we brought in Hannafin, when the first podcast we did after we brought him in, it was like 3 days later, and I said, this is the guy they're bringing in to be the heir apparent to Gio. And Devin, what you were saying, Gio was dad here. I mean, everybody Gio played with looked like gold. I think he made Brody look better than he should have been. I think everyone he played with looked better than he should be. And I wonder with Shillington if that's the same with Tanev. Is Tanev making him look better? But I think the Flames have a solid enough top three in Hannafin, Anderson, and Tanev that's affordable that I think you can find enough guys to slot into the other three that you could afford to either trade Shillington or Valimaki in a hockey trade if there's value there.
I just see it a lot more right now from Shillington than I am from Valimaki.
But Shillington's looked good for what, 10 games? Last year he played 8 games. Like, I think this is a small sample size for us to say this guy's turned it around.
And Valimaki has been out of the lineup for the past 3 games. That's the other thing. You have to give him the chance to get out of his head. But I mean, Zadorov is a young buck as well. He's only 26 years old, right? And so you got to give both of them a chance to get out of their groove or their funk, and hopefully one of them is able to get going here. And right now, especially with Zadorov getting, I believe he got an assist tonight. If not, he's gotten a goal tonight.
He got a goal and an assist. He assisted on Lucic's goal.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where, hey, you know that he's going to get another shot for the next game here. And what is that, against New York?
They play the Rangers on Saturday, and then we will be back recapping on Tuesday the San Jose Thomas Hurdle and the San Jose Sharks.
Exactly. So it's like I don't see Valimaki getting back in the lineup as long as Zadorov is playing, decently enough in his offense or in the defensive zone and producing offensively like he did tonight, which isn't his MO.
And I think this is where the Flames have to figure out what they do look going forward. I mean, I was one of the people who didn't think the Goodbranson signing for what they're paying on 1 year is a bad deal. But you've got Goodbranson, you've got Zadorov, and who's the other defenseman they've gotten there? Stone's there, but he's not playing right now. But I think that I like
Anderson.
Gustav. No, who's Goodbranson's partner right now?
Zadorov.
Okay. So, I mean, Zadorov, yes, he's good and he's young, Devin, but is he $4 million good, which is almost what we're paying him? And I think next year there's going to have to be we need money to re-sign Tkachuk. We have to get rid of him. So I think that while he's looking good now, the Flames are going to have to start changing the minutes to give the cheaper, younger guy a little bit more opportunity. And I think when you're winning, it's easy to keep the lineup the way it is.
Well, and like with Zadorov, you got to see what you have with him. Right, you got to understand. Like, okay, we signed him for a 1-year deal, and yes, he's going to be a third line or third pairing defenseman at 3.75 this entire year. Thankfully, we didn't sign him for longer because we didn't know exactly what we're going to be getting, and now we know. I mean, with a small sample size, what we're going to be getting with him.
Yeah, but I just think that eventually they're going to have to take a look at that and say, you know what, going forward, we need to limit those minutes and get a Valimaki in the lineup because we can afford to keep Valimaki next year.
But but once again, we're talking about Sutter, who, if he sees that a pairing is working, and I don't think he really cares about what upper management says. Realistically, what are they going to do? They're going to fire him after he's doing so well, right? It's
Again, small sample size, but
yeah, and I completely agree with you. Is that I feel like, okay, let's invest within this young prospect in Valimaki in comparison to a third round pick going the other way, and we're getting Zadorov for 1 year. Hey, Zadorov might be expendable depending on how Valimaki's playing at the trade deadline.
And I mean, I would almost even rather keep Goodbranson at 1. I think we get him at 1.9 again next year than Zadorov at 4. Like, I just think it's not even the young guys. It's just about when we've got 2 big contracts to sign on our first line, we just have to manage money. And I think you may have to make some of those hard choices that, you know what, fine, we'll keep Zadorov all year if he's playing, but he's not come back.
No, totally. And what's crazy is that talk about another defenseman that took a long time to sign is Sammy Vatanen. He's an NHL caliber defenseman. I mean, 5-on-5, maybe not so much, but he's very much like Gustafsson that can play on your power play unit and first or second power play unit, depending on who else you have within the lineup.
And I think that there's a guy like, and I'm going back to the question you were asking earlier about, the Flames defense and, sort of who to keep. And there's no value in Michael Stone. Like, there's value here. You're not going to get anything for him on the open market. I don't think
Stone is going to be here until he's 97 years old, though.
I mean,
he's the eighth defenseman.
We paid Michael Stone to go away, and then we brought him back. Like, I wish my boss would do that. Pay me to go away, and the next day pay to bring me back, and still be paying me to go away. Like, you remember that song as a kid, The Cat Came Back? We should have somebody remix that to Stone came back the very next day. They thought he was on waivers, but Stone came back the very next day. He just wouldn't stay away. But, with Shillington, I don't think there's a lot on a value to trade him, because I think that every team has one of him. Every team has that young defenseman that is maybe doing okay, is sort of on the fringes, that sort of thing. But I think that with Valimaki, I think that there's teams that you could get a decent return because they think, we want that hot young first-round draft pick.
That's a great. How'd that work out with Olli Juolevi there, Kev?
Yeah, but we also agree that Valimaki and Juolevi are not comparable either.
No, and I don't think you're going out and you're not trading, for Jack Eichel, but I think if they want to recoup a second, or if you want to get a decent middle six winger at the not even as a rental, I think he's a good enough piece. You might be able to move it for that. I mean, I've said for a while, if Pavel Brendel could stay in the league as long as he could, because he was a first round guy, there's value just for being a first round player.
Yeah, and to that point, I feel like the whole back when Sutter was a coach and then GM for the Flames, he's chucking around second round and third round draft picks, left, right, and center in trades. And if you were a number one draft pick or a first round draft pick within a team, you had a lot of clout for a long time to stick around with that team until you were good. Now it's not quite the same, but I completely agree that Valimaki could easily be traded for a middle six player.
And it's funny you mentioned, Daryl sending those picks out. That's kind of what Tree's doing now. I mean, Tree's kind of giving up those middle 2, 3, 4 picks almost like water these days.
He gave it a middle pick to get Vladar.
And I feel like that's more like a fail-safe for Dustin Wolf, because Dustin Wolf is so highly touted, but Daniel Vladar is highly touted as well. And
how often have we heard? I mean, Parsons was highly touted. Like we've gone down this road before as Flames fans.
Yeah, Parsons, Gillies for sure. The only thing though is that I feel like Vladar, he's 23, 24, and it kind of gives a bit of a buffer for to see what Dustin Wolf can do and potentially will do within this league. I mean, he is shorter, yes, but you look at UC Saros. UC Saros' career save percentage, a 9.26, 9.25, right around there. Who would have thought that, like, after he's been in the league for 5-6 years now? That is absolutely insane for a sub 6 foot goalie in the NHL. And hopefully it gives me hope for Dustin Wolf. And I feel like Dustin Wolf has more potential than either Gillies or Parsons. And having Vladar to be not a fail-safe, but a potential good tandem goalie with Markstrom, I think that's a really good gamble going forward.
Well, and even if not a gamble, I feel like it just buys Wolf time. I feel like being the only goalie in the organization, he might have been pushed forward too fast. And I feel like this buys him the time to ripen properly in the AHL.
And Adam Werner, don't get me wrong, Adam Werner, there, who's another goalie within this prospect pool, he's a good goaltender as well. He was with Colorado before this, and they sought him out. Calgary sought him out to bring him in and to potentially give Dustin Wolf more time, or have that potential to, okay, if Vladar is not going to be the one to help platoon or be a good backup within having a backup for Markstrom, that Werner would step in just easily enough and be able to take those minutes away.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's the other thing is that, okay, if we're going down the goaltending route, listen, we know Markstrom cannot play more than 60 plus games this year, and if you have those prospects and that depth within the goaltending position, like we're talking about with Val Mackey being potentially expendable, man, one of those two goalies could be expendable as well, and you get easily enough the same value back, if not move up within a draft pick or a draft pick within the next two drafts as well.
And I just think in those cases, Devin, like we were saying, Tree's given out a lot of them, but I feel like he has the assets if he wants to quickly recoup some of those picks.
For sure, depending on where they're at and how he feels like his team is rolling.
The good news is with the defense we have on defense, he's probably not going to go out and get your Gustafsson or whoever at the deadline. Like it seems like he usually goes out and gets the veteran defenseman at the deadline. It feels like he's got those guys already, so he's not going to have to make his usual deadline moves.
So hopefully he can. If there's a deadline move, it's going to be for a middle six, forward, whether or not that's a center or a winger.
Yeah, or recouping some picks.
Okay.
And one person we actually haven't talked about today, which I'm very surprised, is Vladimir Tarasenko.
I was about to bring him up.
Okay, yeah.
What do you want to say about him, Kevin?
I'm not inclined to do it. I feel like the Flames have Tarasenko's. I mean, I know he's skilled, but is he better than Mangiapane? That someone's going to throw an egg at me saying that, but I mean, he's coming off a pretty significant injury. Yes, he's off to a great start. If you're the Blues, this would be the time to trade him. But if I'm the Flames, this is not the time to acquire him because it would be an overpay. I would wait. I want to wait and see more before I delve into Tarasenko. I was not in the camp that they should look at him in the offseason.
It's one of those things where, okay, that's a deadline acquisition. That like, other than that, I don't think it's one of those things where he has one more year left at 7.5. Don't know if that is, he has a no trade clause as well. So, man, you got to have a good spot for him to be in, and to push down Mangiapane, I feel like that'd be a detriment to the team.
Deadline. He feels like that guy, and we see that guy every year that you go, you paid what for who? Like, he feels like he's going to be that guy at the deadline. And do you want to be the team that overpays for Tarasenko? I think somebody's going to, and I don't want it to be Calgary.
I have one more name I'm just going to throw out there. I have to look. Montreal's off to a terrible start. They are going to need to shake some things up. What about Brendan Gallagher?
I feel like Montreal always wants too much for their guys.
Yeah.
That's kind of always been the knock on them is, I mean, even last year there was talk of moving guys, but they always want way too much for who they have. And I don't mind Gallagher, but my question is, he's 29 at how many years left? I mean, he's got 7 more years at 29. I'm not sure that's the deal I want to get into.
Yeah,
and he has a no movement and no trade clause.
I could see him waiving it to I feel like a lot of the guys that don't want to waive are guys in the US. I feel like if you're in Canada, you'd be more apt to stay in Canada. So I could see Gallagher doing it, but I don't know that I want to take on a 29-year-old at 6'5" again when if we'd had Tkachuk and Johnny signed with some cost certainty, I might feel different about it. But I don't want to take on 6'5" for 7 more years on a 29-year-old player.
He'll be 24.
That'll end up being a buyout.
34, 35, but yeah, 100% a buyout. The amount of miles that is on that body, he'd be a great pickup, but not at that number and not at that cap, or not at that his tenure left.
I mean, if you want to look at a guy who you might take from Montreal, I would be more apt, while I think, again, it's a long contract, I'd be more apt to look at Josh Anderson, who's making $1 million less, just because I feel like at 27, you're getting a little bit more mileage out of that. Or if you really want to go that way, go with the guy that was linked to the Flames a few years ago and go Tyler Toffoli out of Montreal.
Oh, I'm going to hate that contract. I think that contract is going to wear so quick.
Toffoli's? He's got 3 years left at 4.2.
Yeah,
2 years after this.
That's right, 2 years after this. But I think I can agree with you on that it might wear thin, but I feel like that's a contract that's lower risk based on who we've got on the lineup. I mean, by the time he gets to be bad, you'll have Lucic off the books.
And, I mean, talk about Josh Anderson. We were very high on him. He is very hit and miss. He's hot and cold all the time, and he's making 5.5 in comparison to Toffoli being 4.25.
I'd even take Joel Armia before I'd go after Gallagher.
I would love that'd be
Give me
great.
Joel Armia every day of the week. Every day. Talk about a top or a middle six player. Oh.
But again, I think
Love
based on the fact that they're playing in Montreal, the cost is going to be too high.
Yeah.
3.4 for the next 3 years after this for a 28-year-old middle six player. I mean, oh man, yeah. I wonder what Bergevin would, if he's still there, would be offering or be wanting out of him.
And you know what? There's going to be some team that's on the fringe of the playoffs who will pay whatever he wants to get one of those guys, and it's going to bite them in the butt.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Is there anything else we need to talk to? I think we've pretty much. I think we all feel better.
I think so.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else that we need to really talk about.
So, Devin, you were saying earlier that, and I don't disagree with you, that Vegas is going to have a tough time this year because of all the injuries. Does that mean the Vancouver might sneak in just because of that?
Probably not, because Travis Green is the head coach. But until he gets fired, I don't know. I'm just kidding.
It's also funny that Alex Chason goes from Edmonton to there. It's like chasing mediocrity across the league. He was in Calgary and they were mediocre. Then he's in Edmonton. Now he's in Vancouver.
Well, look at the head coach that was in Calgary, that was up in Edmonton, that brought him in. I'm surprised he's not in Vancouver with Jason.
He was in Vancouver. That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
I
think it's the division is still quite fascinating. I mean, I think we'll have to see where Vancouver's at after a pretty significant, pretty good comeback win if they can carry some momentum. The Oilers, I know Dan will appreciate this, but I'm just not there with them yet. I'm not buying it. I know what the record is. I can Google it. I know the points that McDavid and Draisaitl are getting, but I'm just seeing this. This team is still terrible defensively.
The Oilers are still one of those teams that has the good center and no depth. And I don't know if I go into the season with a 41-year-old starter and say I'm feeling good about this.
Yeah.
I optically I agree with you, Dan. But Kevin Woodley, who's been on our podcast, he talked about a goaltending guru. He says that the analytics and the way that Mike Smith has changed his game, they absolutely love him up there. They think that
he definitely looks good when he's playing, but how often is he not playing?
Well, that's exactly it. It looked like a very weak injury that happened to him that has put him out for the past 2 weeks, going on 3 now.
And if I look around the league at tandems, I would say that Koskinen and Skinner is probably the worst tandem out there.
It's true.
Every time I hear Skinner, I think of The Simpsons. Skinner!
Exactly.
Maybe that's what they should play on the screen every time he lets one in. Skinner!
Hire me in Edmonton, yeah.
And I mean, we're also talking about a team that's just played Calgary, who has a potentially 3-headed monster with Holtby, Khudobin, and Bishop whenever he's going to be healthy, and if he's going to be healthy for long term. That think that Khudobin could be on his way out, and potentially Edmonton would be a part of that trade.
Well, I mean, Bishop, it'd be tough for me to acquire a Bishop, a guy that keeps getting injured all the time.
No, Bishop wouldn't be on his way out. He'd be a tandem with Holtby.
Well, Kevin was talking about guys leaving Chicago. What do you think the chances are that Edmonton takes a swing at Fleury?
Who are you giving up? Because you need to be retaining salary and then giving up then some, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to work out, but I think that there may be a mass exodus of guys wanting out, and whether it's this year or even that could be your next year plan of, bring him in as he's leaving Chicago because he's not going to want to stick around.
Well, yeah, he only has 1 year left at 7, and that's this year.
And I think just because Chicago's where they are, I think you'd get Chicago to eat some salary on a few of these if you had to.
Well, but I agree for sure, but you're going to have to give up something a little bit more, which would be probably a second or a third, most likely a second, especially
it's not like Edmonton has anybody that's ever made it to the league outside of the first round anyways. Give them whatever pick you want.
I love it. Yes.
Give them Derek Ryan, your second, your third, your fourth, your fifth, your sixth, and your seventh. You still got your first round pick. He'll be your top center next year. We're back to where we started.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Graham Mosman? Yeah, that's what I thought.
I was just the only thing with the Pacific about all of this of who's going to make the playoffs. I just feel that San Jose is the team that I think is going to trip all of this up. They're the wild card.
Oh man, I was listening. Bringing up Kevin Woodley again. I was listening to him this morning on Fan 960, and he was saying that James Reimer was basically their number one, and that they played better in front of James Reimer than they do Aiden Hill. And to me, that blows my mind. I mean, especially being a Leafs fan as well, that James Reimer is still within this league and still making an impact throughout. Even him in Carolina last year, his goals against wasn't the best, but he still got wins. So they talk about a likable player that the team in front of him loves playing for.
Yeah. All right, let's leave it there. We thank everyone for sticking around the whole time. Maybe we'll just leave this comment for Devin to deal with. But Dan, tell us what's going on with the Fireside.
Fireside Chat, we have our new episode that comes out tonight. We've never had an episode that was so outdated so quickly. We stopped recording last night at 9:30, and by 11:30, our whole show was about Jack Eichel coming, and he was gone. So we're like, wow, show's not even put together yet, and all of a sudden it's no longer relevant. But if you want to hear more Eichel talk, the new show will be out tonight. I got to go post it when we're done here. So brand new Fireside Chat podcast tomorrow. You can find us anywhere fine podcasts are found. iTunes, Spotify, wherever. You can go to firesidechat.ca to learn more about us. And of course, we're on the Twitter, Fireside Podcast. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/firesidechat. Or like I said, anywhere that fine podcasts are consumed, you'll find us there.
And how do we follow you, Devin?
At Gordhouse09 on Twitter. And by the way, I'm gonna chuck this out there because I haven't done this yet. For our Pig and Duke podcast here, our Pig and Duke rewards, if you will. I want to call them rewards. But if you want to go to an NHL game with us here in Calgary, Vancouver versus Calgary, then let us know in our DMs for the word of the day today is Buffalo. Once again, it's Buffalo. All right. But and if you want more of a chance, make sure that you retweet our podcast link.
Cool. And Sean is Beardy Canuck 03, Tyler TNOBLE, Chris is Schneid's SCHNEIDZ, I am KEVOLE, podcast_hockey, Facebook.com, soon to be meta.com, the hockey podcast, YouTube.com, the hockey podcast, and wherever fine podcasts are sold. We will be back Monday for our regular episode. And then Tuesday is our recap. We will be recapping the San Jose Sharks are in town, funny enough, in Calgary. So we'll do that. We will talk to you all there very soon. Bye for now.